Well, I personally love this time of year. Don't you? Half and half. All right. It's my opinion that, Christmas music and Hallmark movies before Thanksgiving is a little bit much, but certainly now, what are we, like 9, 10 days away from Christmas? Now is prime time. There's a buzz in the air. It's a really great time of year. We personally have been listening to Y94 FM, Syracuse's #1 hit Christmas music station, since Thanksgiving, right after Black Friday. We turned it on, and Noelle has been eating it up, which is really fantastic. She loves everything about Christmas, actually, which is great, because her name is Noelle, and it's the French spelling for Christmas, which that's not why we named her that, but it is kind of neat that she is loving Christmas. When she sees snow, she yells Christmas. When she sees our Christmas tree lit up, we're bringing her down the steps in the morning, she yells Christmas. She sings dingle bells, dingle all the way. Tried to record it for this week, didn't end up happening, but she loves Christmas. And she gets that from her mama and me. We both have a great love for this time of year. We've invested a lot of money into a lot of decorations for our house, and we invest a good portion of time every year to put those decorations up, and it took a little bit longer this year now that we have a new home to us, trying to figure out new places. In fact, we don't have enough decorations. We've got new pockets for places of different things, so we need to get some more things when everything goes on the sale after this year. But it makes our hearts very happy to see our little girl so excited for this time of year, because we try to make Christmas time very special. And speaking for just myself now, I have always loved Christmas. My parents did a really good job of making it a big deal leading up to, and then on Christmas Day, it was like my mom's goal was to fill the entire living room walking space with gifts, even if that meant wrapping one pair of socks so that she could fill the whole space. That seemed to be what she did. And my siblings and I, we would be careful to walk to the couch and stepping over every gift ever so carefully like they were landmines. And then my dad would finally get up. It was his one day off from work, and so he would get up far after us, and he would get the camcorder. Yes, the camcorder. Yeah, he looked like he was from News Channel 9 or something. But put it on a stand, got that queued up, and then we would just go to town. I mean, we just free-for-all in our house. We grabbed a gift, make sure it had our name, made sure you checked to see who it was from so you could give proper appreciation, and then you just went at it, and we were done in like 10 minutes. It was crazy. But we enjoyed that morning every year. And then I got to college, and things got a little bit different. The gifts weren't the living room space wasn't as full because the gifts were more meaningful in terms of their usage. Instead of just being entertainment gifts, they were things that I could use for college life, and they were more expensive, so there were few things. And my brother was 10 years younger than me, is 10 years younger than me, and so he got a lot more gifts than I did. But even then, still one of my favorite times of the year when I was in college, because I got to be with my family. I got to appreciate a different joy of the season, shifting from gifts to just being with family, because I went to college that was about 24-hour drive away, or a $400 plane ticket away. And so when I got those 3 to 4 weeks to spend with my family, I made the most of it. And so I got to enjoy that time with my family. And then in my post-college years, when we were living in Michigan, that family focus continued. And though we were a drivable distance away from one another, we still only saw our folks about once or twice a year. And whereas the college Christmas break lasted for about 3 or 4 weeks, being married, having a child, having full-time jobs waiting for us back home, our trips only lasted about 1 week with our family, split over 3 to 4 days with each family. But we made the most of it still. We played board games, we watched movies, we sat and talked, and it became a joyous occasion for us, even if it was a short time. But therein lies the downside to the holidays, doesn't it? No matter how long they last, they must always come to an end. And not just the holidays themselves, but all the happy feelings that come with the holidays as well. I mean, just taking these different phases of life that I have already mentioned. As happy as I was to open up all the gifts that I wanted as a kid, by Christmas evening, or certainly by the next day, I had played with everything like 100 times, and I would, cycle through them to keep them exciting, but inevitably, I would lose my joy and excitement for them, and I would kind of get bored and, eventually start wanting to get back to school to be with my friends. And it would finally hit me at some point where I would feel really guilty because I realized how much my parents had invested in these gifts to make me feel happy, and here I am being bored over them. And so that was quite a downer. Then as a college student, even though I made the most of my 3 to 4 weeks with my family over Christmas break, spending it with them as much as I could, eventually I would have to return to college. And sure, you could take the practical possessions with you, but you can't bottle up that family time and the feelings that come with that and take that with you. Eventually, homesickness sets in, and you can do nothing but wish for the holidays to last just a little bit longer. And then, living in Michigan and spending 8 hours on the road to visit family was always well worth it, but 3 to 4 days just isn't quite enough. Just when you're unpacked, settled in, things are starting to feel like they once did, you've got to pack back up and hit the road for the dreaded 8-hour trip back home. December 25th is a great day. Christmas is a joyful holiday. There is perhaps no greater build-up to any other day than that of Christmas. But all of that build-up, all of the happiness that we feel leading up to and during Christmas can make December 26th that much more difficult. I mean, just as an example, Y94 FM, they stop on Christmas Day. Then it's back to the pop music, which then we go back to Christian radio for us. But for many of us, it also means going back to work. You get that one day off. If Christmas is in the middle of the week like it is this year, you get Christmas Day off, and then December 26th, you're back to work, back to your normal lives. For many, as early as Christmas evening, or certainly by the next day, we are saying goodbye to kids and grandkids that we only get to see for these special occasions. Or maybe we're the ones that need to say goodbye, and we're the ones that went and visited them, and now we have to hit the road to get the return trip home. We may stretch it out as much as we can and stay for a few days past Christmas, or maybe our kids stay at our house for a few days past Christmas. But whether it's December 26th or January 6th, eventually we have to hit the road and get back to the old grind. And if we're the ones hosting, our homes go from hustle and bustle to eerie silence. And we go from parties and dinners and gift exchanges to nada. To make matters even worse, you call it a drag, to make matters worse, it's at this point that you realize that you have to put all the Christmas decorations away. And I, for one, am not looking forward to that this year because I think our little girl is going to take it especially hard. I can handle putting away all the Christmas, putting the entire Christmas season into boxes, and I can handle all the work that goes into that, and I can handle the Christmas season coming and going. But I know that she will not understand. It'll be her first time to really experience what we're going to refer to as the Christmas crash. Okay, she's going to go to bed one night, and the next morning it's going to be all packed up, and she's going to look at us like Cindy Lou Who. What did you do to me, man? Hopefully it goes well, I don't know. But I'm not looking forward to that day. All the high energy, high emotions, and high expectations of Christmas comes crashing down eventually. And it hits some people harder than others. The return trip from happiness and family time to reality and our everyday lives can often be a difficult trip to make. But that's not uncommon in our lives. I mean, we go from emotional highs to emotional lows a lot, from joyous occasions to mundane, everyday occasions. We might call them the mountaintop moments to valley moments, our lives back and forth between these two extremes. For my married folks in the room, my guess is that your wedding day was a very great, joyous occasion, special day filled with a lot of celebration and every positive emotion that you can imagine. But then you have that typical, the honeymoon's over moment, whatever that looks like, that first fight, second fight, third fight in the same hour. It's like it ends at some point. For my parents in the room, I would venture to say that the birth of your child was one of the best days of your lives. I know that it was for me. But then there's that first night of no sleep whatsoever, where you're up every hour, on the hour, changing a diaper or giving feedings. And your spouse may be helping you out, but you still get up every single time because you've got this new noise in the home. And just when you're about to drift off to sleep, you're woken up. And this cry that once brought joy to your life just a few hours earlier is now causing you to go crazy thinking, what did we get ourselves into? And maybe you don't experience that on the first night, but give that a week and eventually you start feeling that way. How about my hardworking men and women in the room. There's still the thrill of excitement and satisfaction when payday comes around, isn't there? There's just something about seeing those numbers on a check in your bank or in your bank account for all the labor that you've put into for a week. But within a couple of days, for some of us, a couple of hours, most of that check is just gone like that to mortgage or to rent or credit card debt or health insurance or car payment, whatever. That piece of paper that once brought you happiness and contentment is as good as gone, and you're left counting down the days until the next payday. My point, life has these moments that bring us overwhelming happiness, but that is always soon followed up by moments that bring anything but happiness. Life sometimes completely robs us of happiness that we once had. Circumstances are always shifting. No matter how long you find yourself on the mountaintop, you must always come back to level ground. And we can pause to take in those great moments, but then it's back to reality. Whether that means going back to work, back to school, back to normalcy, we can't ever seem to hold on tight to the feelings of what special moments can bring. And because of that, joy seems like this elusive feeling that we have. Many of us would consider joy to be synonymous with happiness. It's this feeling that comes and goes like the wind. Weddings and births and paydays and holidays, they naturally bring us joy today, but then it's gone the next day or the next day or the next day. It seems like it never lasts. But what if we're thinking about joy all wrong? What if the joy that the Bible talks about is different than happiness? What if joy isn't just an emotion that comes and goes with our circumstances, but it's something that transcends our circumstances? Well, I want to take a look at a group of people in the Christmas story who lived a life void of happiness, but full of joy because of the miracle of that night. Who are we talking about? Well, think about the different nativity scenes that you've seen through the years. You know who's supposed to be there. We've got an example right up here. There's baby Jesus, duh. Mary and Joseph, double duh. The three wise men, although they probably shouldn't be there, but that's a story for another day. You've got the livestock because Jesus was born in a barn, which means Joseph couldn't use that joke on him later on in life. And then who's that leave? Some of you got that, thank you. Who else does that leave? The shepherds. Shepherds were more than just placeholders in the Christmas story. And they are more than just figurines in our modern day nativity displays. No, they were major players in the Christmas story, which is really significant when you think about the life of a shepherd. It's not something that we think about today. It's not a popular occupation. It's certainly not one that we see in our, Western culture. And since these people spent 100% of their time with their sheep, they were dirty men. Rain or shine, they were out in the fields with their animals. So without boots, they wallowed around in the mud on those rainy days. And without deodorant, they sweat their tails off, walking around for miles each day in the desert heat. And without shelter, they nestled in amongst the dirt-stained wool of their sheep to keep warm on those cold nights. Because of their occupation, shepherds did not have much of a personal life either. As long as they were shepherding, they were unable to be married or to have children. And for many, the only family that they had walked on four legs. So if you think that your family is bad, imagine having your only family be dumb sheep, okay? No comments, please, about your family and comparing them to dumb sheep. While they encountered other shepherds in their wanderings, they still lacked any real deep friendships because they were always on the go. So the only real friends that they had, again, four legs, not really great conversationalists. So as you can imagine, it was a lonely life for these shepherds. And these friends and family members that they had were also susceptible to great dangers like predators and disease. Inevitably, they would lose a sheep here or there. And because of the bond that was shared between the shepherd and his sheep, this would be devastating to the shepherd. To have what little you have that you cared for and connected with taken away from you would have been heartbreaking for an already lonely man. So you add all these things together, and you can understand why the life of a shepherd lacked happiness or joy. I'm sure there were glimmers of joy in their lives. They got to see more sunrises and sunsets than anyone else on the planet. They were able to walk through landscapes that you and I will only see in movies. But on the whole, They were certainly the single most joyless group of people in the Christmas story. They were dirty, homeless, lonely, vulnerable, and unhappy men. But on that holy Christmas night, things changed for the shepherds who happened to be near Bethlehem. After Jesus was born in the stable, an extraordinary event took place out in the fields nearby, and we pick up the story in Luke chapter 2, verse 8. This, of course, is the portion of reading that Linus reads in a Charlie Brown Christmas. So instead of me reading it, we're going to let Linus do it. So Bruce, go ahead and roll the clip.
Lights, please. And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them. And the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God, and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown.
All right. Thank you, Linus. But there's, first of all, you know when he says sore afraid? I thought he was just saying so very funny. Like it was old-timey, sore afraid. In the King James Version, it's S-O-R-E. I don't know what that means, to be honest. Sore afraid instead of so, but whatever. So there's more to the story, though. This is from the NIV version with words that I understand. When the angels had left them, nope, you're going to have to go, sorry. I left it up in case the video didn't work, so. One more. There we go. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which was just as they had been told. Now, when I read this story, I think about how the angels could have gone to anyone in the town of Bethlehem, but God sent them to shepherds. And maybe, this is highly likely, it was because of their connection to David, the young shepherd king from Bethlehem, who would become Israel's shining star of a king. But it's also just as likely that God chose them on purpose. He chose the lowest of the low, the dirtiest of the dirty, to show that his joy could reach that far, that his love could reach that far. To show that he was their God as much as he was anyone else's God. The Messiah that was for the whole world was first celebrated and seen by these nobodies of society. In fact, the highest of all created beings, that being the angels, are the ones that meet and surround these, the lowest of society. So two groups of beings on opposite sides of the spectrum come together, and they almost overwhelm the shepherds with their fanfare. Thousands of angels joined in the praise of the arrival of the Christ child. So this was a huge moment for the world as a whole, so a really, really big moment for these guys. A moment that brought them immense joy, a joy that they had not experienced in their lives. In fact, they had not experienced much joy of any in their lives. And yet, here they are witnessing the greatest event in all of human history. They are purposefully sought out and told the news. And so they go and they see what the angels were singing about. They get to witness for themselves the Messiah, the promised one that they had only heard about in stories. They see the babe wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger, just as the angel had said. And they feel this overwhelming presence of God, and they know that what they've just experienced is going to remain with them for the rest of their lives. And what is their initial response? They go and they tell the people of the town all about what they have seen and heard. They become the first missionaries of the baby Messiah. These same men who were looked down upon, who were not well spoken, who didn't have much human contact or social standing, put all of their fears and insecurities aside, and they went from person to person and spread the news that they had saw and experienced. This was a joy that they could not contain. This was a joy that led them to sharing with anyone who would listen. They went from villager to villager, telling them their testimony and confirming what the angels had said, that this would be good news for all people. But I want to draw attention to something. In verse 20 it says, the shepherds returned glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. Now, this verse is up for interpretation on whether the shepherds were returning to Mary and Joseph after their short missionary journey, or whether or not they were returning back to their fields. And I think it doesn't matter how you interpret that, because the reality is, at some point, the moment was over. The sheep needed their shepherds back in the fields, and they were quickly thrust back into their monotonous lives. But something was different. They had a memory and a joy that had forever changed them. And with every day and month and year that passed, life slipped back into normal. A life that didn't bring joy most of the time. This experience did not change their social status. This experience did not change their livelihood. This experience did not change their circumstances. But it changed them. It revealed to them the heart of God. Whenever they were in doubt, whenever they were struggling to be joyous because, let's say, they lost a sheep or there was a stretch of bad weather, they could remember that night where everything changed for them. Real life doesn't automatically come with joy, but that doesn't mean that life has to be completely absent of joy. In other words, life doesn't always bring joy, but joy can always be brought into life. The shepherds had a shared experience with God, the God incarnate, that could be their true north when it came to joy. Whenever life was making it difficult to be happy, they could remember that Christmas night. Though they likely lived normal lives for the rest of their lives, they did so with the strength that comes from the joy of the Lord. And because of that, I think we can learn a lot from the shepherds, more than any other character in our modern day nativity scenes. While all the other characters seem extra special in their own way, the shepherds seem extraordinary. Not extraordinary, but extraordinary. They lived normal lives. They weren't special in any way. They almost seem out of place when you really consider the nativity scene as a whole. But that's the beautiful thing about the shepherd story. God sought them out. God chose them. God wanted them to hear the news first and to start the spread of his good news to all people. God surprised them with joy in the midst of their extraordinary lives. And God does that very same thing for us. We too are normal people, just like the shepherds, though with much better hygiene. Most of us. I'm not looking at anybody in particular. The beauty of the Christmas story is God's arrival into human history. While he was present all along throughout history, he took it a step further by literally taking a step into human history and becoming like you and me. There is great joy in thinking about that radical move of God, a move toward us. It's a move that reveals the nature of God in the clearest of ways. And that is the reason why we celebrate this time of year. But God is not done surprising us with joy. He still shows up to us 2019 years later to remind us of his being with us. And it may come through the simplest of things. A song that comes on the radio at just the right time. An act of kindness from a stranger that you either witness or you are a beneficiary from. A visit from someone that you haven't heard from in a while. And these may seem like random occurrences, but I believe that God is behind them, orchestrating simple things to bring joy to your life. Sometimes they're quite small and sometimes they're quite big. And I challenge you to give God the credit when these random occurrences come. It may not be as glorifying as the arrival of the Messiah, but it's still a reason to glorify God. So look for these things and give God praise. And that's another reason why we need to love this time of year. These moments that bring joy to our lives seem to heighten this time of year. People are more likely to try to do good for one another. Things happen that connect us back to more joyful times in our lives. You don't have to return to normalcy after the holiday and allow it to be as big of a crash as it can be. You can seek the joy of the Christmas season all year long. I'm not talking about listening to Christmas music all year long. I'm not talking about leaving up your Christmas decorations until Easter. I'm talking about seeking the one who is the reason for Christmas. Because remember, life doesn't always bring joy, but joy can always be brought into life. One of the most encouraging things that I've seen this Christmas season has been from our very own church members. Despite an understandably happy year, Michelle Stagels has decided to purposefully choose joy over the last 50 some odd days. She has shared posts of joy on her Facebook page every single day. Sometimes the joy is simple, like seeing a child's face light up at a Christmas concert. Sometimes the joy is more complex as she talks about finding joy in the midst of a day that's been extremely hard emotionally. Michelle is an incredibly strong person, but she would tell you that she's not strong. She would tell you that she simply has to force herself to choose to find joy in everyday life, no matter how hard it may be. And I find it encouraging and brave, and I see it as a beautiful testimony to a life of joy being lived out despite the pain and difficulty of grief. And she is a testament to bringing joy into life. By the way, I had permission to share that. I didn't just surprise that with her. Whether it be the result of a Christmas crash or something far more serious, something that makes the holidays one big crash in and of themselves, you too can bring joy into life. It's not about faking happiness. It's about redefining joy. Joy can often be used as a synonym to happiness, and I think that that's appropriate. In fact, if you were to look up the word joy in a thesaurus, you will find happiness as a synonym. And I'm not here to debate with Merriam-Webster. What we've talked about already, about being surprised by joy, by God, can more often than not be an emotional experience. The experience that the shepherds had was an emotional experience. They felt happy to see the Christ child. We will feel happiness from moments like that as well. Joy can be emotional, but it is so much more. The Bible refers to joy in a number of different ways. There's the joy that gives us strength, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. There is the joy that we can have in the midst of suffering, which obviously cannot mean happiness. And there is a joy that comes as a guarantee to the reception of Jesus Christ and His Spirit into our lives. The biblical understanding of joy is always connected to God, and this understanding of joy is more closely synonymous with words like contentment and assurance. You can be content and not happy. You can be assured and not happy. You've heard the phrase, when God is all you have, God is all you need. That's contentment. When it feels like you have nothing going for you in life, but you can at least acknowledge you have God on your side, that's contentment, and that's true joy. When you're not sure about how life is going to all work out and when it's going to turn around or if it's going to turn around, but you are confident that God is at work even when you cannot see it, that's assurance. That's joy. There may not be a happy, slappy feeling associated with either scenario, but there is strength found in the Lord. Christmas reminds us that God is with us. It reminds us that God is on our side. It reminds us that God understands our suffering, as we know that the Christ child would one day grow up to endure the worst suffering that any of us have endured or can imagine. And we know that Jesus is victorious and will one day bring us a second advent, a return trip to make all things right and remove even our most troubling circumstances. Because of all that, we have joy. We have joy in the midst of suffering. We have joy in the midst of pain. We have joy on the mountaintops and in the valleys. We may just have to change the way we look at joy and what it actually means for us. So I challenge you to look for joy when life won't offer it on its own. Look for joy in the midst of everyday life. Look for things that bring the emotional version of joy into your life and give glory to God for those things. But look also for the more disguised moments of God's promised presence. If you have a hard time finding anything, carve out a small portion of your day to just sit in his presence and seek his face. He came to earth to be with us. It was an invitation to shepherds long ago, and it's an invitation to you today. Do so to the point that you are content in him alone. That's where the truest form of joy can be found. As Andy Williams most famously said, the Christmas season is the most wonderful time of the year. And in a roundabout way, even that is inferring that the rest of the year is not that wonderful. Eventually, the holidays will be past us, and we will return to the less wonderful time of the year. We will return to our everyday and normal lives, but the good news is that there is joy that is available to us as we seek it. Appreciating the emotional joys of life and seeking the contentment and assurance of God's presence at work in our lives is something that we can do all year round. Life doesn't always bring joy, but joy can always be brought into life.